Realtors of Reddit. What's the most bizarre reason someone decided not to buy a house? Story 1. Spent around 2 months looking for a property with a couple. They barely qualified for what they were looking for, so each offer was a battle just to get it reviewed. Finally found a house that had a willing seller, good listing agent, and it checked all but one box. That box. The guest bathroom had a shower curtain the wife didn't like. Seriously? Not a glass door or anything permanent, but a removable curtain held up by those bars you twist into place. I even offered to buy them a $200 gift card for Home Depot or Bed Bath & Beyond to help them find something different. Nope, that curtain killed the whole thing for the wife. Needless to say, I fired them as clients immediately after that. Story 2. Former realtor here. Had a couple that wanted to live in a specific neighborhood and wanted a rectangular pool with a small pool house and covered patio. There were exactly 3 houses in the neighborhood that met these requirements. I spoke with all 3 owners and one said they would sell, and they were generous on their pricing. Why, you ask, did the couple decide not to buy? The house next door was yellow. Story 3. I knew someone who didn't buy a house because it had too many closets. Other than that, they thought the house was perfect. After a moment of stunned silence, I suggested they buy the house and close some closet doors and just not use the closets. Story 4. This story goes back to around 1960, but my parents found it so stupid they told me. A family friend and his young wife found a home they wanted to buy. The wife's mother was going to give them the down payment. They were super excited about the house and said it even had a breakfast bar, that is a counter with bar stools underneath, in the kitchen. The mother said no way would she ever allow her money to be spent on a house with a bar. They tried to explain it to her, but ultimately could not buy the house. Story 5. Not me, but my dad did some residential and commercial back in the 70s. Lady came in and loved the house until they got to a guest bedroom that was painted yellow. She instantly switched and said, "I can't buy this house because this is yellow." My dad says, "We'll paint it any color you want." Her response drove him to do strictly commercial after that. But I'll know it was yellow once. Story 6. Not a realtor, but I worked in finance at an RV dealership a few years back. I had a couple fly in from out of state to look at a brand new $400,000 unit that had specific features they were after, and they put a deposit on it. I got them approved and scheduled a time for them to sign, but they backed out at the last minute because they weren't sure their cat would like it. They flew back home. Story 7. My family home was bought by a young man in the military and his very quirky wife. They had already ruled out dozens of houses and settled on ours because it had adequate chi flow from the front door. When they saw that the bed was directly under a window in the bedroom, the wife freaked out and said that it was sucking out our brains. Story 8. When we were looking at houses in the early 2010s, we went to see what we thought was a really nice house. The listing did not show any pics of the finished basement. We toured the upstairs and were very happy. Then we went downstairs. The stucco on the walls was the hard icing kind, which had been pulled outwards into sharp points so that, if you had fallen down the stairs, you would have impaled yourself. There was a wet bar made of thousands of pieces of tacky cowboy kitsch that had padded faux leather with buttons on the 3 surrounding walls. Everything was glued/screwed/nailed to the wall, including the animal heads, and was listed as included with the sale. It smelled odd. There was a giant shrine to Mary with a water feature and a ton of plants, embedded in a divider wall. It took up the whole wall, and we couldn't figure out how they had run the water supply. There was a bathroom off the wet bar. It was purple. The walls were purple. The floors were purple. All of the porcelain was purple and had Russian oligarch-style gold fittings. It matched nicely with the all-teal master bedroom ensuite. After about 10 minutes of looking at this, our realtor glanced at us, said, "This is too bizarre," and suggested we leave. The house was still on the market a year later. Story 9. Not a realtor but potential buyer. Our realtor brought us to a house listed as a 3BR, 212 bath. After going through the house, we liked it a lot, until something clicked for us. There were no bathrooms to be found. We went through the house again, and upon opening a closet door in a bedroom, we found inside the tiny closet a single toilet. No lights, sink, tub, nothing. The house wasn't even a 1-bath, it was like 1 4-bath. The realtor, very seriously, told us if we knocked down the wall, ran some pipes, we could convert one of the bedrooms into the bathroom. We laughed thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Story 10. I had one experience while we were looking for a house where we were the ones that came across as weird for our reasoning to not buy it. We had found a really nice house and everything about it seemed great. I had one concern about a tree that was planted extremely close to the house, and I wanted to look into it because you don't want foundation problems. Not all trees have roots that will damage a foundation if they're planted close, though, so I found out what kind of tree it was to see if it would be a problem. In the process of learning about the tree, I found out that it was a yew tree, and that the pollen of male yew trees are chemotoxic, meaning it is toxic to cancer cells. However, it has this effect by functioning in your body as if you were taking low levels of chemo drugs, basically. So people end up with low-grade symptoms of chemotherapy from exposure to the pollen of this tree, and most of the time have no idea why they feel sick. So we told the real estate agent that we were interested in the house, but needed to know one thing. Is the tree in front of the house, right up against the large window, male for female? She asked the owners, and they said they didn't know, but I imagine they thought that was a weird question, lol. Since they couldn't tell us, we decided not to buy the house. Story 11. Loved the house. It fit all our needs. We were pumped. As we were leaving, we stood in the porch to take in the neighborhood. The house directly across the street had built shelves into the windows facing the house we were viewing. The shelves were filled with old, creepy dolls, staring at the house we were looking at. Hundreds of dull, lifeless eyes waiting for you to go to sleep so they could kill you. They were sun-faded. We noped out of there with our realtor's blessing. It was 20 years ago and it still freaks me out. Why? Just why? Story 12. While not very bizarre, it's always strange to me when someone won't buy their dream home because of the address number. Honorable mention, during an open house I was hosting, someone pulled sage out of their pocket and started burning it to get Satan out of the black countertops. Story 13. My partner was a bit more superstitious than me, but not to the point where I ever thought it was odd or obnoxious. Enter the downtown house we both looked at. It was small and old and quirky, which I was okay with. It had a pond in the backyard, and I love ponds, so we get to the house and go in. It is extremely segregated. There are many oddly shaped rooms and lots of doors and no hallways and no flow. We get to the kitchen and there is a very narrow and small door leading up to the attic access. I realize now that's pretty normal for old houses, but at the time, my reaction was more, oh neat, like a hidden passage. My partner, however, saw that hidden doorway and got very spooked and just bluntly and suddenly told me and the realtor, "I'm sorry, this house is a no for me, I hate it, I'll be outside." We both looked at each other like, and I followed him asking him what was wrong. He totally had the heebie-jeebies and was almost shivering and was like, "I'm not going back in there, there's something really wrong with that house." I asked him if it was okay if I finished looking at it, and he said that was fine, but there was no way in hell we were buying it. The realtor and I finished the tour just fine. I didn't find anything odd about it at all, it was just a bit of a weird layout. It needed some fixing, and the house had no flow. The pond was neat. My partner never was able to articulate further on what creeped him out so bad about the house. Story 14. I'm not a realtor, but one of my childhood friend's mothers was, and she told me this story when I was in 4th grade, and I still think about it nearly 20 years later. She came home upset one day after school, and we asked her what's wrong. She said she just lost a sale because of a toilet seat. During the initial walk-through, her client pointed out an epoxy toilet seat that was filled with seashells and how much she loved it. She made an offer on the house. Later, they do the final walk-through right before going to go sign the closing documents, and that toilet seat is gone and replaced with a normal white one. The woman is pissed and refuses to close without the toilet seat. The sellers refuse to give her the toilet seat. The sale falls through. Can you imagine buying a whole ass house because you want an epoxy toilet seat? This was the 90s. So there wasn't the whole internet of things at our fingertips to just up and get a replacement. But still. Story 15. Walked into the house and noticed a crystal hanging from the ceiling. In the kitchen there were more. Kinda strange, but okay. Went upstairs and all of a sudden they were 10, 15 in the hallway. Then we got to the basement, room in the back corner. Opened the door and turned on the light. Hell's bells, that is when it went to a 10. It was a dungeon. We backed out. Looked at the realtor, and she said it before we did. We are never talking about this. Story 16. We actually did end up buying this house, but might have passed had we paid enough attention. My husband and I live in a HCOL, an extremely in-demand area, and needed a larger house really badly after having our first kid. I found one that just went on the market in a neighborhood that we had previously driven through and liked. Husband had COVID, so I toured it alone and texted him to just put in an offer, so he did. We were in contention with like 10 other people the day the house went on the market. But I wrote a great letter to the current owners and we got it. Fast forward to moving in and we realized that the 2-car garage is too short to realistically park a car in. I can squeeze my Honda CR-V in, but it's nose-touching wall and ass-touching door. Once we realized this, we finally noticed that every single house in the neighborhood has their cars parked in the driveway. I looked at the house during the workday so cars weren't in the driveways, and honestly I probably wouldn't have noticed anyway because why would anyone see cars in driveways and assume that meant that every single garage was too short to functionally store a car? Story 17. Just a note, House Hunters is totally fiction. They shoot after a house is purchased, and the other two are houses that happen to be for sale that match the area. I am selling an unconventional home, and my realtor was approached to see if they could use my home in the show. I declined because all they would do is point out why not to buy my house. My realtor said she's had clients do this before, and they're always upset as it paints a house you're trying to sell in a poor light, and you don't get any money for it. Story 18. During the sale of my last house, I had buyers who liked the virtual tour. They then scheduled and liked the in-person showing. Their realtor said they were going to make an offer, then ghosted because they wanted a southern exposure. Same as above, except for their showing was on garbage day. The village didn't allow trash cans, only bags on the curb. They were going to submit an offer, but then backed out when we explained the bags because not having trash cans was a deal breaker. I inquired and found they were young people and not old, so it wasn't physical strength issue. Had someone complete a showing and declined to offer because they couldn't see the front door from the back of the house? Not sure if they were drug dealers concerned about security or what. Had a couple book a showing and showed up with literally 8 other family members. They just walked right into the neighbor's house, much to their alarm. After the confusion, they toured our house and ghosted. Had a couple demand $80K off the price of the house because it didn't have a stone patio in the backyard. Lol, WTF? Had someone decline because they didn't like the paint colors in my kids' bedrooms? Painting when you move in is fairly standard operating procedure. Story 19. My elderly parents were looking to buy a house in the city where I live. One house met all of their criteria, and the furnishings inside even matched the furniture in their own home. Unfortunately, they were concerned that the arrangement of the kitchen would make it difficult for someone in the living room to hear the TV if someone in the kitchen was running the garbage disposal. I don't think they really wanted to move. Story 20. The bizarreness was more from the sellers and we acted accordingly, but they had let bamboo grow straight through the stone foundation of the 1890 home we were going to buy. Our inspector specialized in historic homes and had never seen anything like it. They also had installed a very nice new HVAC, but cut clear through the main support beam of the house to run ductwork for it. Story 21. During home inspection, one of the bolts that held down the master bedroom ensuite toilet was not installed into the floor straight. Thus, the bolt holding down the toilet wasn't sitting flush with the base of the toilet. The wife was uncomfortable, sitting on a bent toilet. The husband was furious with the reason. Canceled the deal anyways. Second home she canceled because we couldn't confirm if anyone had died in the home. Husband was going to lose his shit. She ended up liking another home, which I thought was worse than the last one, and in a worse neighborhood. Husband signed quickly in case she changed her mind. Good times, Lowell. Story 22. Not a realtor but a co-worker lost a sale because the inspector was an idiot. I don't know the exact details, but when pouring foundation, sometimes the pourer runs out of cement in one truck and finish pouring it with another before it comes close to drying. Similar to how you would pour the rest of milk from one carton before adding milk from a new carton. Apparently that can leave slight discoloration line, but that's about it. The buyer cheaped out and got a newbie inspector who saw a line discoloration and thought it was a huge symmetrical foundation crack that looped around the foundation. The buyer's real estate agent basically went WTF, told him to find an experienced inspector. She herself hired an experienced inspector who came in and explained the exact situation to her client. But the client, understandably so, got spooked and walked away. Co-worker sold it a month later at the same price to another buyer who had a qualified inspector, so it was more annoyance than anything else. But don't cheap out on the inspector, they're important. Story 23. Not a realtor, but used to work for one. Had a client who was ready to close on a house, then backed out at the last minute because the neighborhood did not have an HOA. I was stunned. My family was driven from the first house I grew up in by a psychotic HOA president who happened to be our next-door neighbor. Harpies from hell, all of them, except maintenance-only ones, but pretty much all of those exist because someone got out of control. Story 24 literally happened to me last week. Showed my home off market to a couple from Minnesota. They flew into my area for a weekend specifically to see my house because they liked the photos I sent them of the place. They wanted a home with 5 bedrooms all on the second floor, and at least 4K squeft. My house is the only one within 130 miles for sale fitting that description, and we put a lot of work in to unfuck what the prior owners did to the place. The prior owner thought he knew how to do his own work. He did not. We spent tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours fixing stuff he DIY'd poorly, and sometimes dangerously. They come and spend 2 hours meticulously going through everything. They loved the house, and their realtor said on the side they'd put in an offer within the next day. Then they drove off. The next day, my realtor calls me damn near in tears, laughing, saying that he just got off the phone with their realtor. The couple decided not to put in an offer because a full street over and down a hill there are above ground power lines. They thought those power lines were 5G cell towers in a cluster, and they were terrified that it was going to beam COVID into their kids' heads if they played outside. They said it with a straight face to their realtor, apparently. The kicker is that there's actually a 5G tower 2 doors down from my house that they didn't even notice. They ultimately bought a very small house 2 towns over with no above-ground power lines, but with 5G towers in the vicinity. Edit, terrified, not mortified. Edit 2, added a couple more details for a more complete picture. Story 25. We had an offer come in for an apartment in Park Slope, New York. Great apartment. Great location. Guy puts in an offer slightly over asking, and we're stoked. Then, he pulls it back because he was freaking out about there being 2 working fireplaces. Apparently, this was causing him anxiety, so he went to his therapist to talk about it, and they made the decision that it would cause him too much ongoing anxiety to have those fireplaces. I have no idea why fireplaces would cause anxiety. I saw them as a positive. But anyway, we sold it for slightly less someone else, and the guy didn't have to deal with knowing there were fireplaces in his apartment. Story 26. We were buying a house in Buffalo while living in Florida, so long-distance shopping, with an in-person trip to see the final contenders. When we arrived, we had about 5 houses on our list. The realtor took us aside and said, "I have to tell you that a murder has been committed in the houses you picked out." We're like, "Well, which house?" And he said, "This house and this other house." 2 houses, how did we manage that? Well, it was one man, and one of the houses was his parents' house, and the other was the house with his wife and kids. Apparently, he killed his mom at the one house, killed his wife at the second house, and was stopped by a cop for speeding, which saved his dad's life. Dad was at work, and he was headed there. Kids were fine, at school, never saw anything. We did tour the houses. They had like big sections of the carpet missing in one of them. We bought a different house altogether, but I still think about one of those houses. BC, it was a good house. Story 27. The reason I didn't buy one house was my realtor was running late, so I was parked in my car near the house I was going to look at on the side of the road for about half an hour. About 2, maybe 3 blocks away in a rural area of Washougal, Washington. About that time, this asshole pulls out of the driveway of the house I'm scheduled to see, pulls up alongside my car, rolls down the window, takes a picture of me with their phone, then flips me off before they peel out the tires and drive off at high speed. Turns out it was the homeowner that was trying to sell. So yeah, I didn't even bother with seeing the inside of what was an otherwise good prospect, because I was so irritated at the owner. My realtor later gave their listing agent a call about it because they were annoyed about missing out on a potentially large commission, and I later found out the owner thought I was a druggie trying to steal Wi-Fi from him. Not sure why, as I was in a pretty nice car wearing a suit that day. But yeah, I did not buy that house. Story 28. Back in 2010, when foreclosures were still skyrocketing and prices were dropping, I was the buyer's agent. I had a sale fall through at the closing. Both parties had everything they owned in moving trucks. The seller was bitter about prices, saying he was getting ripped off, etc., etc. He removed the chandelier in the 2-story foyer, and he wasn't supposed to, as it was attached and did not have an amendment saying it did not convey. Go to the walkthrough, and the buyer immediately said he wants that specific chandelier or he is not buying it. I called the seller's realtor, said she knows, she told him not to take it, etc., but the seller said, nope, he is taking it. Thought we could close by offering $500 each from our commissions, since there was no way the seller was going to budge. Buyer said no. Went up to $1,000 each, so $2,000 total, and there is no way that chandelier cost $500. And buyer said, I want that one from that jerk. Told the seller he still had to pay our commission, because we held up our end and brought him the buyer. He didn't care. Cooler heads did not prevail. Buyer sued for his moving and living costs. Seller went FSBO, so have no idea what he got. Buyer lost confidence in me, so he went somewhere else. New build spec in a different part of town. It was a very expensive nightmare.